Most or biggest topics in the Bible, or most talked about topics in the Bible, is money. It's very interesting. When you look through the Bible, it's mentioned a lot of times, and it talks in different contexts about it and different ways about it. And yeah, there's a lot of explanation about this topic, and there's a lot of warning about it. There's a lot of understanding about it that people have to understand about, and it's just huge. Like, it's really, really big. But the reality is, we don't really talk about that topic very much, which that's not a good thing. So if the Bible mentions it so much, I think we need to talk about it more, right? And we can't just talk about it from an aspect of like, oh, it's all bad, it's horrible. No, like, we need to talk about it from a rounded perspective, from everything that's about it. And one of the things that struck out to me was actually, I was reading Timothy, the book of Timothy, and it talks like in Timothy 6. There's a verse in there. It's verse 6, and it says, "Now true religion does bring great riches, but only to those who are content with what they have." So what it comes down to with money is actually being content with what we have. Are we content with the things God already has given us? Or are we always longing for more? There's another good example in the Bible, like the story of Joseph. And I just recently read it. We read the Bible once a year. And so we came to the story of Joseph. And it's like in chapter 39, Joseph is just like sold into slavery, right? And he's serving Potiphar. Potiphar is like a kind of like under the pharaoh and like an officer, and he's just, like a really powerful man in that society at the time. And Joseph gets bought by him and starts serving him, right? But one sentence that really I never was really aware of and never really picked up that way, was verse 2, where it says, Adonai, or God, was with Joseph, and he became wealthy while he was in the household of his master the Egyptian. So Joseph, a man who was sold into slavery, became wealthy while he was still a slave. It's very interesting to me and a little bit controversial if you think about it, because usually, like, when we think of that, people in that position, they don't have anything. But I wonder if in that case it was also because Joseph was content. He served the best way he could. He gave his best to, like his master. Like, he didn't demand anything, like, because he actually couldn't. But he worked hard, and out of that, God blessed him. But it came out of contentment again. Like it talks in Timothy, what we talked about earlier. Yes, you can. True religion leads you to wealth and riches sometimes, but you have to be content with what you have already. That means God can add to the things that you already have. He can't add to the things if you are not content with anything, because it will never stop. I met so many people that, they had a lot, like really, really a lot, but they were still worried about money. They still had this fear, this underlying fear. And they were like, if I just have a little bit more, just a little bit more. So they were never content with what they actually had. And they're always driven. So money, in that case, actually took over, which then in Timothy, like 1 Timothy 6, a little bit later in the chapter, it talks about that. It talks about, like, if we are not content with what we have been given, let me find the verse. Then it comes down to, furthermore, those whose goal is to be rich fall into temptation. They get trapped in many foolish and hurtful ambitions, which plunge them into ruin and destruction. So God can give you money. There's nothing wrong about it. But if you're not content with what you actually get and always strive to have more, then it becomes a problem. And then the love of money comes in, which is the root of all evil. This is where the issue comes in. So Money in itself is not an issue. Being content with what we have, that's the goal. And not striving for always more. And why is that? Because if we're content, we're believing that God will provide for us. Our trust is in our Father. Our trust is not in the money, right? And I talked about this early in the year, where we put our trust, but our trust in that case is in God. It's not based around money. But then, when our trust is in God, He can give us money. It doesn't matter, like He can bless us. He can make us rich. He can make us prosper. And that's His heart too at times. But we have to be content where we're at. So I just want to encourage all of us today. Let us be content with the things we have. How can we be content? You know, it's through thankfulness. If we are starting to be thankful for the things God has given us, it changes our attitude. It changes the way we look at things. It changes the way we live our lives. But contentment and thankfulness, they go so close together. So I want to encourage all of us today. Let's look at the things God has given us, from the smallest to the biggest, and let's be thankful for them. Really be thankful. Not just saying it, but really deep in there, be thankful. And then we come into that contentment. And then whatever's going to happen, if we become rich, great. If we don't, doesn't matter. We're content with where we're at. But that's the key. That's the real key to all of this. Be content. We saw it in Joseph. We saw it in Timothy. And there's a lot more example probably in the Bible. But we can't look at all of them. But I want to just pick out those two. Their lives were changed. Like Paul talked to Timothy and challenged him. And Joseph lived it. And both their lives were different. So let us all live content and thankful. Have a blessed week. Bye.